Hey Cole, we are now live. I really appreciate you joining me today. I know it feels like months ago since the folks over at Flotweg introduced you and I can only imagine as Director of Brewing Operations over at Rhinegeist, you've had a very hectic and need to say busy past 12 months, I bet.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. It is
So
definitely
what has your past year been
been a
like?
year. Yeah, it's been busy.
Has it been a good year
Obviously,
though? I mean, looking back on it,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
No,
there might
we
have been a
we got
small lag.
through.
I think Cole has it been a good year.
Yeah, it's been a good year. Obviously, global pandemic aside, we've got managed our way through it, and we're coming out the back end, and things are looking bright. So we're excited to get into the summer and hopefully get out of COVID.
No, I think we're about there, and it's been a while, but I have been to Rhinegeist in the past, and I had such a good time when I went there because I absolutely love ping pong, and you were one of the few breweries I visited over my travels that has a ping pong table. Is that table still there?
It is. We did have to put it away for COVID because we had to move to like a seated only model and all that. So we are planning on bringing it back. We're excited to get the Pong back on, and definitely looking forward to that in Pepper.
Yeah. Are you a ping pong player yourself?
Not a good one. There are definitely some staffers here at Rhinegeist that are much better than I am.
I think both times I played on your table, I was disappointed in my performance because when I'm not drinking with the Rhinegeist beer in hand, I'm typically a pretty good ping pong player. But then you throw in a couple of your fantastic beers, somehow my skill level goes down quite a bit, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's definitely playing with a beer in hand and playing without. It's the performance definitely takes a hit.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I have to ask you. This is the conversation I like to begin all these sessions with. When you were a kid, you're working at a brewery now. It's like a dream come true for you, I imagine. Actually getting to spend your life in craft beer. But if you were just a kid on the playground, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Like most kids, it was a lot of different things. But I think for a long time, I wanted to be a zoologist. I was really into animals and the zoo and that kind of stuff.
Did you ever pursue anything in that realm?
Not really. Although being in brewing, I now farm yeast and bacteria. So I'm still heavily into biology, just microbiology instead of zoo biology.
So growing up, thinking about working at a zoo, you ended up obviously going to school for something in microbiology or something similar?
Yeah, I went to Oregon State, got my degree in fermentation science. So I studied fermentation, beer, wine, cheese, all that kind of stuff at Oregon State.
And at that point in time, you decided to go to school there. Were you already thinking that craft beer or the brewing industry in general was where you were going to go, or what were your goals with a degree like that?
No, I was a psych major with no plans to do anything with it. Um, yeah, my early 20s was a lot of craft beer drinking and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Fortunately, I worked with a dude who was in the program already and introduced me to it, and obviously I was hooked. So I made the switch and yeah, graduated with fermentation science and never looked back.
So you gave up your psychology future?
I did, and I think the world is better off because of it.
So looking at your first craft beer experiences, I mean, you were in Oregon, you were in a place with a great craft beer scene early on. What were your memories like? And was there that one moment where you realized, oh my gosh, this product is absolutely amazing? Where does it come from?
Uh, Growing up, like I graduated high school in '99. Craft beer in Oregon at that point was pretty prevalent. It was a scene. So there was really never a time that I didn't know what craft beer was. It was just beer. I had Budweiser and all that kind of stuff, but next to it, you're drinking Dead Guy from Rogue and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of always been around there. Um, so there was never really a, oh my God, craft beer is this thing that's so much different than beer. It's just beer.
Now, were you a brewer at any point in college, or did you first teach yourself how to homebrew, or do you go full speed and just learn on a commercial scale?
I was a home brewer in college. Yeah, I did some home brewing and kind of played around with that a little bit, which was fun. Um, Obviously, in college, any way you can get alcohol cheaper is makes you very popular and is interesting. So that was definitely a lot of fun and had a great time doing that.
It always blows my mind that more college students aren't homebrewers because just like you mentioned, it's a cheaper way to mass produce your own beer in your own kitchen. And I wish we saw more college students become homebrewers. I feel like it's a skill that'd be very valuable and appreciated in those years.
Yeah, I think there's still a quality barrier there. There's home brewing and then there's making good homebrew. It's not something that everybody masters right away. So
Although I would
you got to devote yourself to get good.
I would almost argue, though, that a college homebrewer doesn't necessarily care about quality. They're just more concerned about, quantity and potentially the ABV of what they're producing. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Particularly back then, 90s, early 2000s, that was certainly the attitude. I would hope college students these days are a little more discerning and with all the different options available and everything that quality is a key for their taste.
Absolutely. And, I've been a home brewer for about 10 years. And it's unfortunate because, as the craft beer scene has grown, I've found myself home brewing quite a bit less. I think we all suffer from that just fear of missing out, wanting to try as many different beers as we can. Once again, somewhat unfortunately, because there's so many great beers, but we all know when someone goes to a brewery these days, so often that guest is just wanting to try the newest, hippest, most double dry hop thing on tap. So people have that short attention span when it comes to whatever they're trying these days. So my brewing has definitely diminished over time, but I look forward to someday diving back in. But when you decided to essentially go pro from college, where were you looking for employment when you graduated? What was that process like?
I was kind of looking around anywhere. I was graduating with a fair amount of student loans, so anybody that would take me. I interviewed everywhere from AB down in Los Angeles to a few small startups, and then ultimately landed at Wholesale out in Hood River, Oregon.
And what was that experience like when you first got there? What position were you hired at?
I was hired as a production brewer, just shift brewer, and it was great. I learned a lot. It was hard, weird hours, long hours, and then they were a sizable regional at that point, and we were making 200 barrel batches of beer. It was a lot of beer, but it was fantastic. Their dedication to quality and consistency was amazing, and I think a standard in the industry at that time. So it was great to learn from them and be able to apply that early in my career and kind of learn the basics from a place like that.
How long did you spend at Fulton?
I was there for about 3 years. So.
And in doing so, did you climb any of the ranks, or were you just doing that production brewer work and just working hard to just learn as much as you possibly could?
Just doing the production brewer thing, trying to learn as much as I could. It was tough. Like I said, the hours were long and weird. Working at 3 or 4 in the morning or overnight is a lot different than working in the day. So, it takes a toll, and, you either can adjust your life to it or you can't. And so, it wasn't right for me at that point. So, I moved on and tried to break into the brew pub scene in Portland a little bit, and kind of bounced around there and, decided that wasn't necessarily for me either. I enjoyed kind of the team environment and enjoyed having, big industrial process and all the gadgets and toys that come with big breweries. So I ended up bouncing out of Portland and heading down to Los Angeles to help open up Golden Road. This was 2011. Yeah, at that point. And that was a wild ride as one of the first production breweries to really eye ambitious growth in Los Angeles at a time when I think there was 5 breweries in LA at the time, which is pretty crazy considering there's 20 million people in LA County. So that was pretty fun to kind of go through, starting on a 15-barrel brew house and then transitioning to a fully automated 50 and, 7,000 barrels the first year, and then 14,000 barrels, and then 28,000 barrels, and just kind of crazy growth.
How long did you spend at Golden Road?
I was at Golden Road until the end of 2014, and that was, at that point I was looking to see something different than LA. The lifestyle in LA is a lot of fun, but it is very expensive. And the traffic is pretty nutty, and again, you love it or hate it. And I love to go back and visit, but it's what ultimately wasn't for me long term. But fortunately, I met one of the owners at Rhinegeist. He did a brief stint in sales out at Golden Road, so I was able to reach out. They'd been open for like a year and a half, and I heard they were doing some crazy stuff, and Cincinnati was a young craft beer scene and hungry for good beer. So I kind of reached out and said, hey, I know how to grow production quickly. And, I know what you guys are going to see in the next few years, because I just did it at Golden Road, and let me know if you need some help. And they called me up the next day and flew me out the next week and said, yeah, get out here and let's do this. So been here ever since.
So how quickly did you make that move from LA to Ohio?
It was about a month. I think I reached out the end of November in 2014. They flew me out first or second week of December, and then I was driving across the country the first week of January.
Awesome. So looking back on your first 3 brewing jobs before you ended up at Rhinegeist, so I mean, you were at Full Sail, you were at small brew pubs, and you ended at Golden Road before you headed somewhat back east. All those facilities, I imagine, were quite different sizes. Is that fair to assume?
Yeah.
I guess Full Sail might have compared a little bit to Golden Road.
So Golden Road and Rhinegeist are about the same size. They run a 50-barrel BrauCon. We run a 60-barrel. So it was pretty comparable. Full Sail, like I said, was a 200-barrel, so quite a bit bigger. And just, the scale was quite a bit different. But once you're in kind of production, automated brewing, bigger is bigger. But as a production brewer, it's all kind of the same.
So for you as a brewer, did you miss the hands-on, getting yourself a little bit dirty during brew day, or did you enjoy the more automation, the better? What was your philosophy at that point in time?
When I came to Rhinegeist,
or just in your early days, because when you were at Full Sail, how automated was their system versus what brew pubs did you spend time at when you were out in Portland?
It was Max's Brew Pub, which is a little place down in Tigard. They were, I think, sold last year. But yeah, Full Sail, surprisingly, was fairly manual for the size of system that it was at that time. There was still a lot of running around and turning hand valves and stuff like that. So it was still getting dirty and still sweating quite a bit. It wasn't until Golden Road that I got into the full automation and all the bells and whistles of that kind of stuff, which was kind of a fun new experience.
From Full Sail, did you even know the level of automation you would later experience even existed at the time?
Yeah, I was aware it existed, but yeah, didn't really have a ton of experience with it, nor was it as prevalent in craft at that point. There was a few big craft breweries, but only like the Sierras and the New Belgiums were kind of cutting edge technology. A lot of people were coming out of the kind of slump in the early 2000s and the first craft bubble, and just kind of rebuilding and So I think technology and automation coming into regional craft and smaller craft breweries, I think really started, early 2011, 2012, and now it's everywhere, and you've got brew pubs with automation. So it's come a long way.
In those days at Full Sail, were you thinking in your head of how you can make the process more efficient? Were you almost dreaming of having that higher levels of automation to create better efficiencies in the brew house?
Absolutely, yeah. There was, I think, the longest lauter I ever had was 13 hours. We're doing a black lager, Session Black, great beer, one of my favorite beers from Full Sail. But yeah, it was notoriously hard to run through the lauter tun, to the point where they ended up, after I left, replacing the lauter tun with a mash filter, and solved all those problems. So yeah, there's definitely plenty of time where I was like, oh man, there's got to be an easier way, and there certainly was.
Yeah, it's great. It's funny because those, we'll call them earlier days of craft, because the early 2000s, they weren't the early days of craft, like, when you had the first breweries out there out west. But, you get so accustomed to doing things a certain way, you don't always think there could be a better way.
Mm-hmm.
So many breweries were operating on that manual level. When you start to put that automation in there, it changes the model, it changes the mindset. I mean, one beauty about craft and so many examples is you do get dirty. And when you automate things, it's less hands-on. It changes the overall experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell from your mindset, being more efficient, being more automated, it can bring so much value to the business as a whole. And that's what fascinates me. I love to look at ways a brewery or business can focus on little things and increase production, save money, just make the experience for whoever more streamlined, whether it's staff or the customer. So when you got brought into Rhinegeist, did they give you goals they wanted you to accomplish? Or what was the initial talk about, hey, Cole, this is what you're going to do?
Yeah, it was kind of a do what you know how to do and just help us keep this thing going. They were on a crazy trajectory from day one, and the growth was just astronomical. So it was really kind of just come in, help where you can, and let's try to keep this thing going. Obviously a big task, and took a lot of people, and we brought on a lot of people very quickly to keep that ship going. But yeah, it was kind of all hands on deck and jump in when you can.
In those early years of Rhinegeist, I mean, every brewery wants to be successful, but you use the term astronomical growth, and you don't often hear that in the craft beer space, and that's absolutely phenomenal. But what do you think is the credit for that growth those early years? Was it always the plan to just grow at an exponential level, or why did Rhinegeist even see that level of success kind of in the early days when you were there?
I mean, the original plan was never to grow this fast. I think the original business plan was hit 20,000 barrels in 10 years or something like that. It was very well thought out, very reasonable.
And what are you at now? About 100,000 or so?
Yeah, we're at 100, and we hit 100 in our fifth year. I think it was, the owners, Bob and Bryant, they knew Cincinnati was thirsty for craft beer. There was a void, so they jumped on it, as did several other brewers about the same time. So I think that definitely played into it. It wasn't a saturated market by any means at that point. And then craft beer was well established in other parts of the country. So they were able to look out at other brewers, like Sun King in Indiana and Golden Road out in Los Angeles, of like, how are you guys doing things? Who are you working with, to kind of get the right systems and processes in quickly. So I think being able to lean on industry experience, both internally by hiring people like me and and externally by working with other brewers. We were able to kind of have a model and a blueprint for what to do. And then, like I said, having just done something similar at Golden Road, it's imagine working really, really hard to do something for 3 years and then getting a chance to rewind it and have somebody say, okay, do it again. But, change it. So you skip all the mistakes and take advantage of all the opportunities you missed the first time. And that's essentially what I got an opportunity to do here at Rhinegeist.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. Because when you were at Golden Road, you mentioned that you were one of the first production brewers there. When did they elevate you to taking on more responsibilities? Because the task that you speak of, it seems like you were a bit more than a production brewer.
Yeah. I was the first production brewer, and then we hired another brewer the next week. So I immediately became the lead brewer, head brewer. We had, I think, 4 brewers within the first 6 months. So I was head brewer on a fully automated 50-barrel Braucon, within a year. And then there was some transition between brewmasters, which kind of fell on my shoulders during that transition to kind of keep things going and keep things growing. And that's kind of when I got exposed to the rest of production and production management. So when I left, I kind of was doing double duty as head brewer and production manager. I headed the install of a can line, a rotary can line at Golden Road. So we kind of got that experience and got a taste of maintenance, and the kind of got a nice, well-rounded training in every department at Golden Road before being sent to Rhinegeist to do it all.
I don't want to call it a mistake, but looking back on your time at Golden Road, is there any decision you made? You mentioned that you learned from your decisions there and kind of improved at Rhinegeist. Is there one that stands out as a true learning experience that you've kind of taken to Rhinegeist to do even better?
Yeah, you can't do everything yourself, especially when you're running a production brewery and growing. You have to trust people to do what you hired them to do. Hire smart people, give them an opportunity to make decisions and own their process. Because if you try to run everything and you try to micromanage, you're going to get bogged down, and it's going to ripple across the whole team.
It sounds like when you joined Golden Road early on, it was very much a startup. I mean, they had big goals, but what was the team like in those days? Because on a small startup team, you wear a lot of different hats. So running around like a chicken with his head cut off, I don't want to say it's expected, but it happens a lot in those small companies as you start to scale. What was the size of the company like when you got first brought in there?
Oh, it was small, but big dreams and ambitions, and well funded, so they were able to capitalize. And so, but it was still like, whether you're, growing at 100% is growing at 100%, whether it's on a 5-barrel system, a 50-barrel system, or a 100-barrel system. It's all crazy, and it takes a lot of work. And you have to hire a lot of people, especially in new craft markets where you don't have a stable of craft beer talent just kind of hanging out. I think that's one of the reasons, like the Northwest and Portland and Seattle were able to capitalize so early on and make such good beer at so many different breweries. It's because they had these guys that, Portland Brewing and Pyramid and Full Sail were kind of training all these production brewers. And then these guys were going out and doing startups and joining other breweries and carrying all that base technical brewing knowledge with them. Then you go into a new market like LA or Cincinnati where you don't necessarily have those established brewers doing that. You kind of have to bring in a mix of home brewers and some guys that maybe have a little bit of experience here and there. Some ambitious engineers that like drinking craft beer, and you just kind of piece it together and train them up as you go.
So you were a production brewer with a background in science. Did you have any management experience or any history leading a team at all?
Yep. I worked my way through college, managing a restaurant and the workout facility on campus. So I was managing students for most of my time in college. Different industries, and definitely a part-time college student has a much different work ethic and mentality than a production brewer. But there's a lot of stuff you can learn that carries over.
I can imagine you weren't thinking when you had that college job that you'll be able to apply these skills running a brewery someday.
No, not until I got into brewing and was kind of looking to see what the options were out there. It was definitely, yeah, you either go join a production scene somewhere, or you go off and like do the brew pub thing or start your own. And I think there's different personalities in the industry that you either gravitate towards one or the other, and it's a cool thing about the industry. Whether you want to work on a team and manage and lead people, or you just want to make really good beer by yourself and just do the pub thing. I think it's great that there's a home for everybody, and we all kind of share the same passion.
But it seems like you wear both hats a little bit, the brewing side production hat, but also the management hat where you are the leader. Is that correct?
Yeah, not so much these days. I haven't actually brewed a batch in a couple of years. One of these days I'll try to get back in and bust one out. But yeah, it's pretty much all management for me at this point. At 100,000 barrel a year brewery, there's few instances where I get to just hang out on a brew deck and focus on the brew.
If you're getting your hands dirty, it probably means you didn't hire enough good help.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm making a conscious decision because I want to get dirty. That's at this point, it's going to create a mess if I do. I'll say that first and foremost. Everybody that brews and packages and does everything for me does it way better than I can. So I happily let them do their jobs.
So that's something I would love to dive into. You have quite the team, I'm sure, at Rhinegeist. First off, I'd love to know how big your team of direct reports are. And, how do you find people best for those positions?
In production, which is brewing, packaging, maintenance and engineering, and quality, there's about 60 employees at this point. And my direct reports are the heads of all of those departments, with a few other kind of random buckets like sustainability and safety and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's like I said, it's finding people with really good work ethic that are intelligent. If you can find somebody with beer experience or craft beer experience, great. But half my staff didn't have any experience before Rhinegeist, and they kind of all learned it on the job and trained up as we went, and they're doing a great job. So I think it's, there's a lot of value in just finding people that are smart and that you trust, and building the job around them, instead of trying to squeeze them into an idea of what you think the job should be. And that's probably the theme of quick growth at Rhinegeist, is being flexible and adapting, always adapting every day. What you believe to be true and what you knew was going to happen changes every week, and being able to roll with it and be flexible is the key to success.
The word flexible is interesting. It's hard to learn if someone's flexible through just an interview. So in the interview process where you're trying to find the right candidates to fit the Rhinegeist team, are you the one conducting some of these interviews?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if it's a management position at this point, I'm in on the interviews, and I'll still pop in on some entry level interviews from time to time, if I can get in. Yeah, it's tough, right? You get a glimpse of somebody through an interview and through their resume, but you don't really know until they're working. And so I think it's it's a conversation that starts in the job interview and continues as long as they work for you. Of what do you want to do? How do you feel? Where do you want to go? It's not just cool. You're a brewer, brew. I'll check in with you once a year and that's it, right? I think it's an evolving conversation and definitely something that Rhinegeist has put a lot of effort into of how do we develop people, how do we retain people, and how do you create, the culture, which is what every brewery talks about is like, culture is important and we got to find somebody who's the right fit for our culture. And, breaking down what is culture in a brewery, it's really hard to define and nobody ever really defines it. It's this key thing like, they got to be a culture fit. And what does that even mean? And I think that's the industry's something that they're facing that right now is like everybody hired for culture. And I think everyone defaulted to, well, culture is people that are like us, right? Let's hire people that we get along with, that from day one, they're going to listen to the same music and laugh to the same jokes. And we're going to feel like we've been friends forever. And that's how you have an industry full of bearded white guys.
I was waiting to say
this is why we're in the industry we're in right now and dealing with the issues we are. Because people fall back on saying, oh, well, they're a culture fit as a reason why they play it safe and hire people that are easy to hire and hire people that they think are going to be easy to manage because they're similar personalities. Unfortunately, when you get into management and building teams, it turns out hiring all the same people with similar backgrounds and similar ideals isn't necessarily going to build the best team, and it certainly won't build the most innovative team and the most creative team. So at this point, at Rhinegeist, when we say we want to hire a culture fit, okay, who is most unlike everybody else on our team, right? Like who's going to bring something unique and different that we don't already have, and that's the culture fit.
No, absolutely. I love that you pointed that out. And the term culture and the term community are things we hear so often that people love about craft beer. We want to have that great company culture. We want to have a community in our tap room. But if we truly want to build a welcoming space, we have to make it welcoming and inviting for everybody. And if we're in a community, we should reflect that community. We shouldn't just be a room or a team of bearded white guys like you and I. So Rhinegeist, for example, how do you achieve those goals? How are you putting an effort in to create a more unique team full of people who don't look just like us?
So we have a diversity committee that we have kind of pulled together from across employees across the company to kind of ask these questions. How do we access a more diverse candidate pool? How do we bring more people from a diverse background into the tap room? Because ultimately that's where it all starts, right? You want to hire more diverse candidates, get more diversity in your consumer base. Because that's where craft breweries have been hiring for years. People that wander into the tap room and say, hey, I want to be a brewer. How do I get back there? So by bringing in more diverse customers, that's where it all starts. And the cool thing about being in a city like Cincinnati is like it's a very diverse city. And we're right downtown. So there's, plenty of opportunity for us to kind of reach out and figure out how to pull in, not just bearded white guys that want to nerd out about beer. Obviously nothing wrong with bearded white guys, being one myself, but yeah, it's definitely, it's asking a lot of tough questions and not trying to avoid the tough answers.
No, I agree. It's all about educating the consumer, but also educating your team. And you don't have to have someone who's a homebrew for 25 years to be your next, lead brewer. You can teach someone. So when it comes down to education, when you're hiring people for the Rhinegeist team who might not have the experience that someone else has, what type of opportunities are you giving them to grow and educate themselves?
So we have a great education program. Obviously, we put a good focus on hiring internally. So our brewing team is made up of people that started as, warehousing, packaging, custodians. We kind of pull from all across the company and pull people into brewing. And we've been very intentional about that, so that it's not just the standard work on the packaging line for 6 months and then graduate to brewing. And it's an easy one, and when you're growing fast, it makes sense. But now that we've intentionally slowed down a little bit and are trying to be a little more deliberate with what we're doing, we're making an effort to pull in some other departments and get some more diversity in the brewing team. But even company wide, we've got a lot of initiatives to do extended learning, and kind of we've got a budget for allowing people to take some classes and get some more training that maybe relates to what they do, maybe not, maybe it's just an interest. But again, like giving people new experiences and new points of view is as valuable as any direct job training when it comes to being creative and adapting to, new processes and troubleshooting. So.
It's great you built such a great education program internally, but you mentioned giving them the opportunities to possibly learn more. When it comes to learning outside of Rhinegeist, are you offering any sort of scholarships, or there's any sort of budget you're giving to employees, maybe based off their position, to say, hey, here's $1,000, go spend it to teach yourself more? What type of programs are in place for that type of education?
Yeah. So we, depending on how long you've been in your position and what your position is and how much you're asking for, we've been known to do, several $1,000 scholarships to, like, we've sent people to Siebel and IBD and even over to Germany to study at VLB. So, we challenge our team to bring the opportunity to us, right? Like, I'm not going to tell somebody they should go get an education somewhere and set it up for them and then send them off to have them half-ass it. Like, we challenge you, hey, figure out what you want to do, put together a proposal, come to us and tell us why we should pay for this and help you do this. And there's always somebody that does. So it's been pretty cool. And then even in Cincinnati, the local community college, Cincinnati State, has a brewing program, which has been great. I'm on the board of advisors for that and have been since day one. So that's also been another great pipeline to kind of hire from, and we have brought in several students that are now full-time employees from that program as well.
It's been fantastic to see so many new brewing programs open across the country. I mean, just small colleges, sometimes community colleges even, are launching these beer education programs on the brewing side, the business side. It's absolutely great for our industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, brewing is a fantastic trade. I got my bachelor's degree in it, and I learned a ton of theory and chemistry and microbiology and all these things that, as a director of brewing operations, I am finally applying in my job. But by no means do you need a bachelor's degree to be a good brewer. I know a lot of great brewers with no education. So I think it's perfect for that community college route and the 2-year program to kind of get some good manufacturing skills, learn the basics and learn how to operate in a manufacturing environment. I think at this point that's almost more important. Certainly for production breweries, just when it comes to safety and how you move and how you operate in that kind of environment is very unique and not something you can learn anywhere else.
And safety is a fun one to touch on, because safety, cleanliness, sanitation, they're such important aspects in the craft beer industry, but they're not always, let's just call them, the sexiest topic to talk about. But keeping a safe workplace is extremely important. What type of measures are you the one to implement in the brew house to make sure you're putting your employees' safety first? Is there like a manual? Is there someone in charge of safety in general? How do you enforce and, implement all those procedures that are so vital to any company's success?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it starts with buying safe equipment. Like all of our equipment is got safety interlocks, and it's all compliant with OSHA regulations. So there's no, workarounds and jury rigged kind of homebrew style stuff in a production brewery. There's no place for that kind of stuff. It was very common to see things kind of cobbled together, back in the day. But when you're running a 100,000 barrel a year brewery, things need to be intentional. They need to have the safeties, and that's where it starts. And then training, obviously. Like if people know what they're doing and why they're doing it, they're going to recognize when something's wrong, and what not to do. So a good training program, lots of SOPs, and just having those for every process. And it's something we're always working on. We will never have all the SOPs written. There will always be something else we can write out the manual for and build on. And that's training is something it was hard early on. When you grow as fast as we did, it's hard to get people adequate training before you turn them loose. So there was a lot of like, cool, you've been doing this for a month. You're kicking ass. So have fun, man. And, make some beer. So it's been nice now that we can actually give people 6 months of training in brewing, and it's very self-paced. And there's no like, oh, you have to be trained on these things by this certain time, or it's not going to work. Like we check in with everybody. We have a brewer who their job is to help train new employees and build SOPs and kind of audit why we do what we do, with an eye for always making things more efficient and better and safer, and making sure everybody knows how to do what they're supposed to do.
You mentioned that Rhinegeist was almost slowing down the growth. Is that a true statement to make, or is it more so that you're just taking the time to write down these SOPs and make sure you have the processes in place? That way, when new people come in, you can scale at the level you want to.
We've definitely slowed down. The first 5 years was, like I said, a rocket ship. And then we kind of hit that 100,000 barrel plateau. And that seems to be in the industry kind of the point where you're saturated locally enough that you actually really have to work. And you got to start looking at external markets and building into more states. And, we're in a 7-state, 8-state footprint right now, which for 100,000 barrels is very small.
I was going to make that exact same comment. You're not here in Virginia, so I hope you expand to Virginia someday, by the way.
We will get there, yeah. But yeah, I mean, at this point, we've always grown organically. In the early days, organic was insanely fast because the demand was there. But yeah, as we got closer to 100,000 barrels, the organic growth slowed down, and you further away from Cincinnati you are, just the less demand there is, because Chicago has Revolution and all the breweries up there, and Nashville has a great scene down there. So it's it just gets harder and harder, which is fine. It's a challenge. We're going to continue to grow, and we'll continue to strategically open markets every year as we see fit. There's no end game for like, oh, we got to be at 200,000 barrels in the next 5 years or anything like that. It's just kind of grow, because you should always be wanting to grow, whatever that looks like. COVID was tough. We were down last year, probably about 7%. So that was a year of not growth, but we got through it. And this year's off to a great start. And I think that's kind of the attitude to have, is like be able to survive where you're at, and be able to kind of absorb things as they happen. And whatever happens is going to happen.
And be flexible, as you mentioned earlier.
And be flexible. And that's whether the growth is 100% growth or 50% growth or 3% growth. you got to be flexible, and you have to react to the market as it changes, which we all know is changing very quickly. Craft beer of 10 years ago is not what craft beer is today, and it's a brave new world with seltzers and FMBs and white space and all the things in between.
Absolutely. And looking back on your past year and your COVID experience, everybody's had to be flexible. I mean, Rhinegeist obviously already had the canning line on hand and things like that. But from your job, what were the biggest adjustments you had to make to your operation?
Definitely leaning into package. We had to get more cans at a time when everybody was trying to get more cans. The can shortage is real. It's going to continue for another couple of years. So that's definitely continues to be a pressure point for us. But yeah, just kind of reacting to demand. And I think that's one of our best successes of the last year was because of our self-distribution footprint throughout Cincinnati and Columbus. We were able to help retail, Kroger and those kinds of stores, send our people out. Furloughed taproom employees or private events employees were sent out to stock shelves and make sure beer was out there and help our retail partners. So that was kind of a great win for us and a great way to pivot our staff to keep them employed, keep them paid and help the company at the same time.
No, that's great. So looking back on your time at Rhinegeist as a whole, I mean, you've grown quite a bit, since you got brought in, what is it, almost 7 years ago or so?
6 years, just over 6 years.
So what type of implementations have you made that you have been proud of over time? Are there certain things that you've done that just made processes more efficient, more streamlined? Any changes you brought into place based off your knowledge that have really made a difference?
So much has happened.
Maybe even equipment improvements you've been happy to make that have shown results.
I think our ability to bring in big technology to a smaller brewery. Like before we hit 100,000 barrels, we were talking about using deaerated water to kind of push beer around and expand beer to brew high gravity, and things like that. And it's stuff that big brewers do every day. And certainly it's day to day. But at a 25,000 barrel a year or even a 50,000 barrel a year brewery, it's not as common. So we brought in a brewery engineer early on from across the street at Sam Adams, and he obviously brought some big boy knowledge with him, which is really nice to have. And so I think we were able to scale our attitudes and our processes to what we're going to be in the future, or kind of what we're eyeing in the future now, which has been pretty cool. We're not relying on what we currently know between these four walls to predict what the future is going to be. We're always looking around at the other industry and looking out at brewers bigger than us to see what are they doing, and how can we be better than we are today.
No, that's a great point. Any should want to grow and just broaden their knowledge of whatever industry they're working in. And speaking of which, looking at your peers nationwide, people who are in similar positions to you, do you spend much time interacting with people who are facing similar challenges that you face?
Yeah, that's been one of the nice things over the last year or two. I've been able to pull back a little bit and let my team do what they do, which has given me some time to network a little bit more and try to get out in the industry a little more. Like I'm active in the hop quality group, which is a group of craft brewers dedicated to monitoring hop quality, developing new public varieties, and kind of building the attitudes around hops and how they're grown and how brewers view those relationships with brokers and farmers, and kind of building those relationships, which is very cool.
Is that an angle you ever thought you'd be taking? Just relationship building and straight on education?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yes, yes, and no. In craft beer, there's always been kind of a sense of camaraderie and sharing knowledge and ideas, which is one of the greatest things about this specific industry. So I think that every brewer has always kind of known that you're going to talk to other brewers and you're going to share ideas and collaborate and kind of innovate the industry together. So it's cool to be doing it on a nationwide scale, and talking to people at Sierra Nevada and founders and even smaller breweries. It's very cool to kind of interact with all of them equally, and we all kind of face the same challenges, just on different scales. But the level of respect is I think shared. There's no like, oh, you're only you only do 2,000 barrels a year. What do you know about brewing beer? They know a lot about their process and their beer, and some of the most exciting beer styles that eventually become national trends come from small brewers. So it's cool to be in an industry where that level of respect is kind of shared, no matter where you're brewing and how big you are. And as long as you take the time to continually educate yourself and have a passion for craft beer, I think there's room for you, and it's a very cool feeling.
I agree. And as we wind down, I want to focus on what you mentioned just now about trends. And trends are a twofold thing I like to talk about. First off, you've talked about technology and automating the brew house quite a bit the past hour. Are there any improvements you would still like to see in the tech and automation space, or looking at where you currently have the Rhinegeist brew house set up? What are your goals to make it run even more efficiently and more streamlined?
I mean, craft beer is always doing crazy stuff. I spoke to smaller brewers doing things that then get scaled into national trends. I mean, that's currently some of the biggest challenges bigger brewers have is, all right, so you got hazy IPAs that have 5, 6, 7, 10 pounds per barrel of hops. How do you do that on a production scale? And it's, you don't, was the answer for a long time. So now there's a lot of innovation coming out about how to handle dry hops and how to handle really massive loads. We got a new piece of equipment called a decanter from Flatweg last year, and that thing's been great for handling cold side yeast and hops, and it's been a real game changer. The way that centrifuges were 10 to 15 years ago, the decanter, I think, is the next thing, because we've been able to see, almost immediately a 10% yield increase off that decanter.
Wow,
it's been great.
Now, for a product like that, I imagine they came to you and said, we have this new innovation. Here's what it does. Are you interested? But working with a lot of these industry partners who provide some kind of service or product, do they ever come to you and say, hey, Cole, what can we do better for you? What would make your day easier? Is there that two-way street that happens?
Absolutely. I've actually been asking for a centrifuge that could handle dry hops for years. So whether or not they credit me with the idea, I'm sure it came from somewhere else. But I think they are listening to brewers, certainly. And craft beer is a big enough industry now that the big companies, your GEAs and your Alpha Lavals and all those guys are paying attention, and they're asking craft brewers, what are you doing, and what do you need our equipment to be able to handle, and what kind of new crazy stuff are you processing, be it crazy amounts of hops or crazy amounts of fruit, or it's pretty wild, all the things being thrown into craft beer right now. So there's plenty of opportunity to continue to find efficiency in how we do that kind of stuff.
I was going to ask, they're not calling it the Hackbarth decanter? They're not, naming it after you, perhaps?
No, they're not. I don't know why. It's crazy.
One thing that always fascinates me, there's a brewery out in Oregon, Oakshire Brewing. Are you familiar with Oakshire at all?
I am, yeah.
And whether you like it or not, the smoothie sour is a style of beer that you hear a bit about these days. And we're not going to talk about whether we enjoy them, but it's a popular style. We'll agree on that.
Yes.
And one of the owners at Oakshire is a guy by the name of Sam Holloway. He also runs Crafting a Strategy, which is a highly academic craft beer blog. And he has a community, and the content he puts out is fantastic. And when I heard that Oakshire was putting out a smoothie sour, I knew that the way they were going to do it was going to be a highly intelligent academic approach. And I was fascinated by it. And one of their brewers, Dan Russo, actually wrote a piece on their process to make sure they're doing it as successful as possible. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting when you combine academics with craft beer. And I imagine that's a similar approach that you take. You know, a lot of the styles that are out there these days, you might not love them. They might not be the most refined process, but the Rhinegeist approach to them is probably going to be a lot like Oakshire. You're going to take that academic approach and do it the best you possibly can.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing that's never changed in craft, and I hope never will change, is the commitment to quality first. Like, if you're not making good, high quality beer, you're not doing anybody any good, either your own employees or the industry as a whole. And, you know, the smoothie sours are definitely a thing, because there's a lot of people that are doing them the easy way and not thinking about quality and safety, which I think is putting the whole industry at risk. For a long time, brewing has kind of been insulated from the FDA because it's inherently safe, right? Because of the alcohol, the pH, hops, you know, foodborne pathogens won't grow in beer, right? You're not going to get foodborne illness from beer. That's no longer the case. If something is 75% fruit juice and 2% ABV, you know, you're starting to get into dangerous territory. And that's, you know, putting aside re-fermentation and exploding packages, which is a very real thing. I think those breweries, in an effort to capitalize on a trend and make a quick buck, are putting the industry at risk. And it's only going to be one nasty lawsuit from somebody getting some can to the face before regulation comes down and hits the industry hard. And I don't think a lot of brewers understand just how much leeway they're getting from the FDA. There's a lot of regulations that we're not subject to because of the nature of our industry. And like I said, a few lawsuits and a few injuries is all it's going to take for all of that to go away. So I appreciate any brewers that are trying to do it the right way and reaching out to other brewers and asking how they can, you know, pasteurize their products and prevent re-fermentation. You know, you don't need just a big pasteurizer. There's plenty of ways to do it. And especially because this industry is still so willing to help. Just ask your local big brewer, and, you know, get on the Master Brewers Association, you know, website and ask in the forum. Like, there's plenty of people that have been doing this for a very long time and know exactly what they're doing and are happy to help you do it the right way. All you got to do is ask.
And it kind of goes back to what we said earlier, safety being not the most exciting topic, but an extremely important topic in the industry we love so much.
Yep.
And Cole, it's been really fun talking to you the past hour. And it's amazing to see how much, you know, you talk about scaling businesses, but you've scaled your career quite well. I mean, you've got a great position at Rhinegeist, and it's really fun to hear about what you've done to get there. But looking back on your career and merely just your day-to-day, what makes you content? What makes you satisfied? What makes you feel like you've made a difference? That way you can go home and sleep a little bit better.
I mein, from what I see, most people at Rhinegeist are happy to be here. They enjoy their jobs. You know, I've been in some production meetings where it's pretty contentious, and sales is getting after production and production is getting after sales, and it's a battle. And that's never really been a thing here. Obviously there's conflict, right? You got to figure out how to get things done, and all the pieces have to work together. But I think because everybody really enjoys what they do and has the autonomy to own their job, we're all happy to come in every day and just get together to figure out how to make it work. And I think fostering that environment and creating that kind of healthy work balance has been great. And I think it highlights what a lot of breweries and a lot of businesses are trying to do right now. People are talking about, oh, we can't find people to come work in our restaurant or come work in our pub. Yeah, because you're not paying enough, right? Just because you get away with it a few years ago, guess what? You can't do it anymore because there's plenty of people that are able to make it work. So you've got to talk to your employees. You have to care about their happiness, and it doesn't mean you have to bend over backwards for them and pay them all the money and give them all the benefits and constantly baby them. Like, no, they're adults. You just have to have conversations and, come to an agreement about what's best for your employees and for the business. And talk to them that way. It's not just do this because I told you to do it. It's do this because from my point of view, this is the smartest move. Feel free to disagree and we can talk through it, right? And it's a lot of work to have those conversations with everybody in the company all the time, right? It's not easy. The easy approach is to establish a chain of command and things roll downhill, and that's how it works. But if you want people to be happy, they need to feel bought into the process and feel like they make a difference. And that's what makes me happy, is feeling like I make a difference here at Rhinegeist. And, so hopefully everybody, that works around me and under me feels the same way, that they're making a difference and they matter to Rhinegeist and we're successful because of it.
No, I absolutely love that. I love how you came back to the question towards the end because it all makes sense. You've touched on so many great points this past hour. A decade ago, breweries could be really successful just by making really good beer. But I think a lot of what you've spoken to is the importance of running a strong business, having a great team, putting the effort in to constantly improve and build that team, better your community, and just constantly desire to be the best you can no matter where you operate in the industry, whether you're just that janitor, whether you're the brewer, you're the production director, whatever you may be. It's just constant improvement like any business. And this has been a really fun hour. I really look forward to sharing a beer on that beautiful Rhinegeist rooftop eventually. So here's to better times, Colin. Thanks again. And here's to continue growth at Rhinegeist. Cheers.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Good times. Cheers.
Cheers.